Okay, this is just a general synopsis, right? So I'm just going to let it flow easily, right? Now, as far as in my mind, and this is really like a conversation with myself, like a notepad, notebook thing, right? So I just let it flow. In my mind, right, I've always wanted to be right with God, but the problem being, like with most people, there's just so many different interpretations and so much information that you get buried in it. So what made me take this route? Well, obviously, if you start thinking about it, we're in a Christian constitutional type-ish country, right? And obviously, when you start to really think about it, the basic law that protects us is the Constitution. The Constitutions, not just in this country, but in America and Britain, and it's say Israel, right, are the three major countries that those constitutions emerged from. And then other countries like in Northwest Europe and New Zealand, Australia, Canada, etc. follow suit. Basically because of the work of the missionaries, right, going across the world. And because of Queen Elizabeth I, who was basically the progenitor of the British Commonwealth, right? But if we go back to, and I've always said that Queen Elizabeth is like the King David of the modern era. Because, like, why? Because Queen Elizabeth basically got rid of the Jesuits, who are the satanic, deceivers, got them out of the United Kingdom. And it was also, the other major thing was, of course, the when the Spanish Armada was sunk, this allowed the way for the Britain to have its own navy and to begin to go across the world. And so thus we had the British Empire, and then what followed later was the American independence and the USA, the United States of America. So, but if you notice that the main theme that runs through this is the fact that these countries were built upon Bible principles, the Ten Commandments. The law legislative system was built upon these principles of the Bible. They were Christian nations. They were like blessed nations because they were following to a certain degree the laws of Jehovah as in the Bible and as Yeshua proclaimed. Of course, the satanic counter-reformation. Now, Queen Elizabeth basically came right out of the Reformation, which was the breaking away from the satanic Roman Church, or the satanic Catholic Roman Church, which was never really a Christian church at all, but just a means of infiltrating Christianity in order to control it. So therefore, Queen Elizabeth broke away from this, and then what happened was you had America following suit, with a lot of the American Christians getting away from Rome and going to Christian to start a new country, to be able to practice a religion without interference by the Vatican. So that's the basis of the timeline in a very simplistic interpretus, which is sometimes the best way to give. So if you do research, your natural conclusion will be, right, that the basis of this country lies with the Constitution, which was created by the Bible people who fought against the Roman Catholic Church in the 30 Years' War, etc., 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 to establish the constitutions, and then God gave them a victory, and then they had their constitutions, where they had the freedom away from the Roman Catholic Church Inquisition. But of course, it would just take time before the Roman Catholic Church sent out its agents, the Jesuits, who were the basic premise of the Jesuits was in order to infiltrate all these constitutions, corrupt them, and then turn them back to the Pope, or those, which is the bloodline, that is the satanic bloodline that controls the earth. Satan being at the top of that, or Lucifer, whichever way you want to, whatever name you want to give. But basically the dark force that controls this earth until the return of Yeshua for the final, for the final judgments. I say not one judgment, for the final judgments before the bride of Christ is reconciliated at the end of the time and line and enters the new heavens and new earth, where perfection is for eternity. So we're all leading up to that point where the bride of Christ, which is the different aspects of the saints all through the timeline, are become unified as one. And that's why I say it's like an all-one thing, where they become unified as an all-one bride of Christ. And That is the Baker's general premise that it's leading up to. And when I start to examine it, I start to see that Satan is like I said, it's split up into three counterparts. You've got Jehovah, who is the judge. You've got Yeshua, who is the intercessor for his people. And then you've got you've got Satan, who is on the attack. So you've got these, it's split up into true iron sort of like polarities, right? With Jehovah as the all one and encompassed lower down between Satan and Yeshua. And then the bride of Christ is like the next stage or the lower stage of that. So everything, but the way I'm seeing it is God is orchestrating and using different tweaking systems in that in order to bridge the bride of Christ into perfection to the next stage of creation. And all these other things that he uses, like Satan, like the demons and everything like that, is an essential part of the way he grows, you could say, the bride of Christ. You know, he brings her to fruition through a series of initiations or negative triggers. So that to me is really wrapped up in one, you know, how I see it going. As to the way now, well, I see ourselves at the end of the timeline. I see that all the signs are there, as Yeshua said. We've got all the signs virtually present. We're just really going into, the way I see we're in the timeline now is we're at Daniel 8-ish, where the Antichrist emerges. We're just basically waiting for the Antichrist to come on full stage and the false prophet and take us into the tribulation. So that is my basis of my conclusion at this point. Of course, I could further stack up on that regarding, I think the next phase in this, is, to keep it simple, is that really I'm beginning to see evidence for the actual Antichrist and how the Antichrist will emerge despite the attempts of the patriots, or what appear to be patriots, to retain the constitutions. I'm already beginning to, and the key to that is the Noahide laws, or what I call the Jews. But this is the interesting thing. When you say Jews, you've got to remember that there are two forms of Jews. There's a synagogue of Satan, and or let's say the Talmud Jews, and then you've got the Torah observing Jews, right? And so basically those who add or subtract to the Torah are not of Jehovah, which the Talmud Jews add and subtract to the Torah. In fact, they even create their own book called the Talmud, which has things that directly offend Jehovah or oppose what Jehovah is saying in his Torah. So you've got this schism regarding the Jews, Israel, and everything being controlled basically by a satanic system opposed to Christ. So this is the schism we're under. The false Jews and the real Jews, as spoken of by Jesus in Revelation, those who call themselves Jews but who are not Jews but serve Satan.